Okay, so last week 上个礼拜 Sebastian 有来吗 ？Sebastian 还没来。好，上个礼拜我们介绍了 interface， 请问一下 interface 是什么？是一个 class 吗？请问一下 interface 是什么 ？interface 是一个 class 吗？郑玉婷 ，interface 是 class 吗？不是嘛哈 ？interface 不是 class， 我们有说过，就是如果你是一个 class 的话，它的宣告应该是 public class， 对不对？可是 interface 它的宣告呢是 public interface， 所以它就不是 class。那它不是 class， 它是一个做什么用的呢？它是一个接口，一个可以让其他 class 来连接它的接口。那它是一个什么样子的接口呢？来，何永生，请问一下，你记得 interface 是为了要做什么用的呢？任何你记得的 interface 有什么 ？interface 要做什么 ？interface 是为了做什么用？同样名字的变数哦。interface 可以说是让人家把同样流程的事情，就是重复的使用。那什么叫做同样流程的事情可以重复使用呢？庄玉洁，你记得 interface 是要干嘛的吗？你可以用你的话说。或者你可以告诉我 interface 跟 inheritance 有什么不一样？inheritance 你记得是什么？是什么？继承是什么意思？是可以干嘛的？什么是继承？再说一次。Superclass 跟 subclass， 那 interface 为什么不能啊？继承不是很厉害，可以互相继承，那为什么要 interface？好，被我吓到，没关系，减针有来吗？那你记得的是什么？为什么 inheritance 跟 interface 是两个重要的 concept？ 那我们说刚刚玉姐说 inheritance 是继承，就有 superclass 跟 subclass。那为什么我们要介绍 interface？interface 可以做什么事？不是继承就很厉害，就互相继承就好了啦。开一次以后就剩下 interface 是一个接口，所以它会规范别人的 input 跟 output。规范好了以后，所有人就是透过这个接口去跟某一个 class 做连接，是这意思吧？开一次就好了，是这样吗？哦，好，那所以如果 interface 那到底可是还是没有解决问题啊 ？interface 到底跟 inheritance 有什么差别？言承佑，刚刚玉姐说 inheritance 是 superclass 跟 subclass 之间互相继承。那请问一下，那 interface 的话会是怎样呢？不能多重继承，所以就是 class 之间不能互相继承。那 class 之间为什么不能互相继承呢？因为 class 之间的为什么不能互相继承？刘子琪，我看我今天可以摸手机。来，刘子琪， 哲豪，请问一下，什么叫做不能互相继承？为什么有一些 class， 什么样的 class 才能互相继承？什么时候不能继承？不能继承的时候，我们用 interface 去分享一些东西。那为什么他们不能继承？可以继承是为什么可以继承？继承的时候是这两个 class 它有什么关系？可以用 extends， 对啊，然后它可以 override 它的 method， 这样。那基本上两个 class 可以继承，它们的关系是什么？你赶快说一下，我就可以还你手。你看，不还。如果你看，我就不知道为什么你会这样。我明明就在你后面讲话，你还是可以不理我，对不对 ？Okay, when can we do inheritance? Whenever the two class has relationship. What is the relationship? 问题啊。为什么有两个 class 它是可以继承的？为什么我们会说这个 class 它们不能互相继承？所以他们要用 inheritance 去分享一些东西。为什么有些 class 可以继承？可以继承是什么意思？叶德好，如果你有突然有答案，你可以说。同心鱼，你觉得为什么？为什么有些 class 可以互相继承，有些 class 不能继承？不能继承的时候，我们才能用 interface， 我们才会想说，哦，那我用 interface。那为什么不能继承是为什么？能继承又是为什么？其实原因是一样的。能继承是因为他们有什么关系？怎么？好。method 有可能一样，也有可能不一样。那基本上两个 class 是什么样的关系？你可不可以给我一个范例？一个 super class 跟一个 sub class 的范例。人 people 里面有一个人，黑人、白人、Asian 或者是好。那所以刚刚的范例什么 ？People Asian people can be the super class. Asian can be the subclass. So, what is the relationship between them? 他们都是人啊，所以 super class 可以涵盖 subclass. Super class cover the all of the subclass, but partially different. What's the partially different? Probably the attributes different or methods different, right? So subclass can override superclass method or add new method, right? 也正好你现在了解吗？ So inheritance, whenever we talk about inheritance, we talk about the relationship between two classes. And this relationship means they are subclass belong to part of the superclass. It is a kind of superclass. So, right? So, like a vehicle. Under the vehicle, we can have scooter, we can have sedan, those different types of cars, right? So, they are related to each other. Such this relationship, we can do inheritance. But what is no relationship? 什么是没有 relationship? Like what we talked about last week. We talked about last week, city and wallet. Do they have any relationship between city and wallet? 没有嘛 ，city 跟 wallet 没有办法建构 relation. Is city a part of wallet or wallet a part of city? If not, they cannot be superclass and subclass, right? But do they have any similar procedure they want to share? Yes. Last time we talked about calculate the average and get the minimum. Those are the similar procedure they would like to share with each other. But they cannot inherit each other. So we introduce interface. Interface is not a class, it's a protocol. It defines input and output. So everyone follow my definition of input and output. Everyone follow it and implement the detail. Then everyone can access another class through this interface. So last time we talked about data class, right? And we talked about data wallet. If we want to calculate wallets minimum and average, we need to change data class as a data wallet. The same thing, if we want to calculate the city's popularity, we need to change data class into data city. That's redundant, right? 我重复的做这件事情，我都一样的程序，都一样是有一系列的 input， 然后我要算它的平均值，然后我要找到它的最小值。这个一系列的流程都一样。The different part of data wallet and data city is the object, the target object. So when target object is a wallet, we define minimum this variable as wallet. If target object is city, we define the minimum variable as city. And then here, when we also need to change the input type, because when we input a wallet object, we need to have a type called wallet to receive it. If we want to input city object, we need an input parameter set up as city. Then we can use this object to call the corresponding method to get the value. So those purple parts are the ones we need to change, we need to update whenever we create a new data class. That's redundant. So last time we said we don't want to change data class all the time. We want to keep the same data class for all kinds of the target object. So like this, if we want to find the minimum, the city object with the minimum popularity, then we need to define this mean variable as city. And we need to define the input type as city. Those really need a lot of time. So we think about another thing is interface. So interface, we define something called maker. And this is an interface. And this interface controls what's the input and what's the output. And inside the interface, everything was defined with public. So you don't need to declare public again. So everything here is public. So we need to define the return type and the method name and the input parameter. Since we don't provide detail of the implementation, here we don't have the curly braces. We only use semicolon to terminate this statement. So, who is going to implement the detail of this method? Any class that implement this interface will implement the detail of this method. Remember? Okay. So in this way, we don't need to change data class because we make those possible change target object type as an interface. So here, the mean, this variable means any data, any class type that implement this interface. This mean variable is not major this type. Why? 这个 mean 这个 variable 在这里不是 major 的形态，为什么？ Major is an interface. Interface is not a class, right? 所以 mean 这个变数它不是 major 这个形态哦。What is the type of mean? 什么是这个 major 的形态？是这个 mean 的形态。Any class type that implement this interface, that will be the type of mean. 好，所以我把它变成一个 very flexible way to receive different data type. So this way, any class type that implement this interface major, then mean can become those type. So if wallet implement this interface major, mean can be wallet. If city implement this interface, then city can be the means type. OK? 所以任何这种被定义为 interface 形态的物件的变数，你都不能说它就是这个形态，因为 interface 不是形态，对不对？所以那它到底什么形态？它就是可以有 implement 这个 interface 的任何 class 的形态。那至于是谁，那就是谁呼叫了它，它就变谁。这样子 ，OK？ So here, add this method control input. So here, we don't know exactly who is going to use this data class. So if wallet is going to use this data class and add wallet here, then this major X will become wallet type. 所以这个地方是可以接收新的 input， 那新的 input 只能够是有 implement 这个 interface 的 class type， 所以它可以是 wallet， 也可以是 city。为什么？因为 wallet 跟 city 有 implement 这个 interface， 所以它们就可以被塞进来，它才可以被 assign 的 major X。好，那 so no matter which class that implement this major, they can all use get major, because whenever they implement the interface major, they have to provide detailed implementation for the method inside interface major. So if interface major has 3 methods, wallet has to implement 3 methods from major. Now we only have 1 method inside this interface major. So in the wallet or city, we only need to add 1 major and major this method. 所以如 果你每一次只要宣告我要 implement 某一个 interface， 那个 interface 里面有几个 method， 你自己的 class 中就必须包含几个 method， 几个就是几个。如果他有要求一定要 return， 你的 method 里面就要想办法 return。有一些是 void 的，就不需要 return， 你有可能就空着，如果你没有用到的话。好，但是一旦你决定要 implement 那个 interface， 那个 interface 里面所有的 method 你都必须带入，这样你在做这件事情，在连接到某一个 class 它有连接 interface 的时候，才不会突然找不到对应的 method。你不可以选1、2、3，人家有3个，你选1、3啊，第2个没做。可是要是人家有忽然呼叫的第2个怎么办？所以没有。如果你要连接 interface 里面有几个 method， 你的 class 里面就要包含几个。OK？ Okay. So how to implement an interface using this keyword, implements. Okay? And inside this class, we need to include the method from the interface. That is game major. Here, because this is a normal class wasn't defined public as default. So you have to declare all your methods and all your variables with public or protected or private different access interface. 好，那所以 there, because interface define everything with public, so you don't need to declare public. 在 interface 里面，所有东西都是 public， 都是预设 public， 所以你绝对不用在这里宣告，你宣告也不会有错，但是我们就知道你不会，就知道你不懂什么是 interface。interface 里面就是什么都不宣告，里面的 variable 跟里面的 method 都不会宣告 public， 因为它就是 public。但是一般的 class， 什么是一般的 class？public class， 这种就是一般的 class。一般 class 里面所有的东西都没有 default， 没有预设它是什么。虽然我们的 Eclipse 很聪明，你没有写 public， 它还是会自己想它是 public， 但这不是标准的写法。Okay, so although sometimes you forgot to put public or private in your code, it still can work. That's because Eclipse knows you probably want to define it as public. But that doesn't mean this is by default. Okay, you still need to have a convention to declare all your variable and all your methods. 好，所以在标准的 class 当中，虽然这个 method 这里 interface 没有写 public， 但是标准的 class 中你一定要加入你的 public， 这样我们才知道你是了解程式的人嘛。Okay? Okay, here, common error. The method in an interface you don't need to declare as public because they are public by default. But you have to declare implementing methods as public when you implement those methods inside your class. Okay, so that means you use interface, you implement interface, then you have to include public to define your methods. Okay, so last time I had 2 questions. First question is easy. 林玉凯哪里？ So we know there are several classes in the existing library. Do we have any interface in the existing library? 我们知道在现有的 library 里面有很多 class 啊，像 string 啊、rectangle 这种嘛，对不对？ 你也常用嘛，对吗？那有没有 interface 呢？没有吗？说猜，没有。Anyone? Any other question? Any other answer? Yeah. You think there are some interface existing in the library? Okay. Yes, of course. There are many different things provided in the library. So, like last time I mentioned GUI, graphic user interface. GUI is how you design the element to trigger the action, like a button, right? And if you get into an application, you can use your mouse to move all the windows. So who is going to control those things? Mouse over, mouse click, and keyboard, type in anything about your user interface. Those are the listener and interface. And don't you think the Java experts, they won't provide those kind of interface in advance? 他们一定会有想到有一些 procedure，就像是这种操控电脑的，像 mouse over，还有像 type keyboard 这种东西，还有一些 control 的东西，是不是都是所有不管你今天是那个什么样子的 application， 对不对？你可能是一个统计软体，是一个注册软体，还是什么软体？他们有没有都需要可以让滑鼠控制，可以按 button， 可以干嘛？这个 procedure 是都一样的，对不对？就像我们计算平均值跟抓最小值，这是一样的道理。所以像这种的 procedure 是一样，我们就要提供一些 interface。那这个 interface 就已经提供在我们的 library 当中。这种都不需要我们再额外的去 implement。Okay, so we have several classes and interface inside our library. 林玉凯，可以吗？你知道我在讲什么吗？你有听到我刚说什么？啊？所以我们请问一下，我们 library 里面到底有没有 interface 呢？有吗？有哈，好。那如果大家都那么不专心，下次我来排个座位好了，调动一下。OK， 我曾经有每一个礼拜都排一次座位的，但我觉得就是你们是大学生了哈，就是要好好的。我小时候也是会上课上一上就失神啊，然后或者是就失神，不是故意的，但是然后或者是要准备下一堂课的考试，或者是有某一些作业来不及写，所以就在那个课上做。但我长大的时候，我其实有点小后悔，因为我发现，如果我上课真的很专心，真的把，当然我知道有一些课就是比较水啊，有些课真的如果那个老师有准备，你真的是要花一点时间。就是 follow 那个老师，让你回去真的不需要花太多时间再重新 pick up 很多 concept。对，我长大有 realize 这件事，那我不知道你们要长多久才会 realize 这件事情，但是可以想一下，就是因为我们这个课也没有很久，就只有2小时，然后2小时其实过很快，然后我们中间又有下课。那很多东西我都有重复一直说，那如果你已经听懂，那当然我重复的时候你不要听没关系。但是如果你还是不理解的时候，请你花一点时间跟着我，这样好吗 Huh. Okay. Sorry, Sebastian. So last time I asked you, we can open the custom class, that class we created by ourselves to implement an interface. 我们总是可以打开我们自己设计的 class， 然后叫它写上 implement 什么 interface。But how can we do that for existing class like a string and rectangle？ 我们上个礼拜已经介绍，我可以打开 Word， 可以打开 City， 然后在后面写 implement major。但是，如果我想要算 string 里面的字段长度的平均值跟最小值，我可不可以做？也是一样的流程啊，但为什么我不能做 ？I cannot turn on string class and write down increments major. Can I do that? No, there's no way. So we have to use a way called callback. Did you look up callback? 有回去查 callback 的，帮我举一下手。哦，心酸，有听到 clang 的声音吗 ？Okay, let me return you the computer right now. Try to look up what is callback in Java. Callback. Java 里面有一个concept 叫做 callback。这 callback 到底是什么？你查查看嘛，快点 Google 啊 ！Google 还要我教吗 ？Google 这么简单的事情，查查看，你看不看得懂别人的 example？Callback, what is callback？ 查查看。很难懂，对不对？不好懂，是不是？有没有人懂了？跟我们分享一下。你看那个范例，你看得懂，然后你跟我们分享一下是什么意思。Did you get it? Can you explain it? 你懂了吗？来查一下，应该有很多的范例，看看它到底是什么意思。Okay, let's come back. So, So callback. When we think about to use this data class to measure objects, we require them to be a type of measure. So the class can transfer to, because the class type will become the variable, like here. Here, this mean will become any class type that implement this interface, right? But now we cannot ask string or rectangle, those class, to implement this interface. So mean cannot be string or rectangle, right? Right? 是吧? Originally, the interface, this kind of implementation, it will allow us to define the variable as the type that implement this interface. But now, we cannot ask string or rectangle to implement this interface. So here, mean cannot be string or rectangle. 这 make sense 对吗? Okay. So in this case, we need to use callback. This callback method is that. So we need to have a way to receive string or rectangle object and get the corresponding value from these two objects. And then put these results into our interface. 因为我们现在 interface 已经不能转成 string 或 rectangle 了，所以我们现在要想办法让我们的 interface 可以接受的是形态物件，所以接受的不再只是一个转型的形态，而是一个真的 input parameter 一个物件。Okay, and then we can use that in our interface. So in this case, we do this. We change our interface measure here. Originally, we can use scan measure because this measure can become any data type that implement this interface, right? But now, we cannot ask string or rectangle to implement this measure. So measure cannot transfer to string or rectangle. So we cannot use that to get measure. This way cannot be directly used, right? 我们不可以用一个物件直接去 get measure 这件事情做不到。So we need to change it, become this one. Double measure, and we use object and object. Why? Because we want to receive string or rectangle through this method. Okay? And why we define it with object? 为什么我们要用这个方法来接收这个 object? Measure cannot change to string or rectangle, so we need a way to receive 对吗? We need a way to aware this is string or this is a rectangle. So we make our method to receive an input parameter. And this parameter, we define it with object data type. Because object is the super class of all the class. So anyone can casting become all of the class are subclass of object, right? So object can change to all kinds of data type. Does that make sense to you? 好，我们本来可以 implement 这个 interface，我们只要 implement 它，就会变成一个物件形态嘛。所以 implement 这个 major 的任何 class type 就可以直接去呼叫这个 method。所以当初我们设这个 method get major， 这样很合理，用物件去呼叫它，就 perfect。但是现在 string 跟 rectangle 都不能 implement major， 对吗？那不能 implement major， 我就不能用 string 或 rectangle 去呼叫 get major， 没办法。所以我们要改变一个形态，我们要把我们的 method 变成可以 receive 什么 ？receive 我们的目标的 class type。那 receive 目标的 class type， 因为我不知道是什么 class， 不知道是 string 还是 rectangle， 所以我设了一个 super class 的形态。这个形态是 object。Because an object, this object can transfer to any data type, right? 所以我如果 implement 这个东西的时候，我就可以把它强制转换成 string 或转换成 rectangle， 这样可以吗 ？Okay, so I'm going to change this interface like this, and so.When I have this, how can I implement it? I need to find a way to connect string object and implement the interface major. So I make a connector. A connector. This is a class in between string and interface major. And this class called string major is obvious, right? I make the name to that people knows that actually this is a class to connect string and major. So I can always create a new class. And I can create this new class to implement major, of course. Any class I create, I can assign the implementation of the interface, right? 所以我做了一个中介的 class， 因为我还没有，我刚那个 interface， 我还得想办法传 string 或 rectangle 进去嘛，所以我现在要有一个中介的 class， 叫 string major。This class I can define to implement major。因为是我 create， 所以我就可以叫它去 implement 某一个 interface， 这没有问题 ，right? And since I'm going to implement this interface, I have to implement the detail of the method inside major. So here, public double major object and object. Okay, this is how I'm going to connect to string. Since here is the object type, I can always down casting to a particular subclass type. Like here, I'm down casting an object to string. So this an object becomes string type. So it will be able to call the methods from string class. So I can call length. So I get the string's length, and then I return this particular string's object's length back. That's how I connect the existing class with the interface. 我做了一个，因为我没有办法 string 这个 class 没办法直接打开去呼叫这个去 implement interface， 所以我做了一个中介 class， 我把我的 interface 设计成这样，它的 method 是一个 callback 的技巧。What is callback? It's a function that are waiting for someone to trigger it. You can consider it. It's a function. 它是一个功能。 等到有人去触发它的时候，它才会启动。So this way, I would never know who is going to be the object, the target class. So only here, it triggers these objects become a string data type and get the corresponding method to get the final value back. Then I will be able to process the following. So this interface method is a callback method. It's waiting for someone to trigger it. And whenever people trigger it, it will respond and give us a feedback. So this is the connector, a middle class from string to interface. Since string cannot define to implement interface measure, so we make a class by ourselves called string measure because we create it so we can define it to implement measure, right? Since we implement measure, so we have to provide the detail of this method's implementation. And then we can transfer this object to our target data type. That is the string. So we can use this to call length and get the string's length back. And this way, this method, this way is called callback. So if you still cannot understand callback, think about any GUI, graphic user interface. You always go to an e-commerce website, and there is a shopping cart button, and there is a payment button, right? And two buttons there. Who is going to trigger the button to work? You and users. And user, if you click on the shopping cart button, and they will trigger shopping cart function and class. If you click payment button, then they will trigger payment class. So it's the same. Here, I have a major button, a major function, and I don't know exactly who is going to trigger it, so I'm doing this. So if there is a string major, it triggers my major, then it will return me the string length. 这有一点点复杂。你如果从刚刚你们自己查的范例，再去想想老师现在说的东西 ，callback 的概念大概就是我有一个功能，这个功能我是在那边等待，我是预想好你会需要这个功能。像我在 shopping 在那个 Momo Shop 里面，我可能会有一个存到 shopping cart 的 button， 有一个去直接买单的 button。那这两个 button 它就是会有预设好的功能，一个就是去触动存放在 shopping cart 的功能，一个是触动去结账的功能。那这两个功能它都先买好，那它等你去按下那个 button， 它才会去呼叫那支程式来执行你要做的事情。那这个也是。这个 major 它不是直接像这个 get major 直接得到一个值，它没有，它是不知道谁会去触发它，是 string 还是 rectangle， 它不知道，所以它这个 function 它就在那边等，它等到这个中介的 class 去触发它，发现哎是 string， string 就会去找 string 相关的 method， 然后把 string 的值传回来，所以这个地方它就是一个等待的机制。这种等待的机制就叫 callback。So we make an interface with this callback mechanism, and we have a class we create a class to become the middle of string and major. So we make a class that connects string class and implement interface major. So here we can assign back the string value back to our system. So now I have to show you how to change our data class. So our data class is no longer that easy. So minimize this part. Right now, the previous data class, the minima this variable, we can define it as major interface, right? Because that variable can become any class data type that implements majors. But now, because some of the class cannot implement major, so here we change minimum this variable as object because we don't know exactly is the class inside the library that is going to use this data class or the class we create. So we want to make this data class more flexible to all kinds of class. So no matter it can implement major or not, we want them can use this data class. 好，这里跟之前的 data class 有点不一样哦，专心一点。之前的 minimum 的这个 variable 我们设定的是 major， 就是 interface 的形态。那我们说那个 major 的形态，它其实不是一个形态，因为 major 是 interface， 对吗？它会变成是任何有 implement major 那个 interface 的形态，所以 minima 就会变成任何 class 那有 implement major。但是现在我们有一些 class 不能 implement major， 像说是 string， 像说是 rectangle， 这一些不能 implement major。所以我们想要让我们的 data class 再 flexible 一点，再可以给更多的 class 可以用。所以像某一些 class 就不能 implement major。So here we define the minimum, the target object type as object. Why? Because object is the cosmic class. It's the super class in Java. So everyone can transform from object. 好，为什么我把它设为 object？ 因为 object 是最大物件导向程式设计最大的资料形态，所以它是最大的 super class。所有人都可以 casting object 变成另外一个形态。所以这边我的 minimum 我就把它设为 object。Any problem with that? Okay. And here we have another interface variable called major. Because we still want to use interface to connect it to all kinds of class. No matter it's wallet or it's a string or rectangle, whatever, we still want to follow interface to connect data class. So now our interface already become like this with a method. That method has callback mechanism. And so here we still need to define an interface variable and here. So now let's see. Add this part, the previous data class. When we define add, the input parameter was major, right? Major X. And because at that moment, we can still define all the class that implements that major to become the data type of X. But now, some of the class cannot implement major, So we want to use a more flexible way. So here we define it as an object. So here the input type can be any object. So it can be string, can be wallet, can be whatever, because here object can dump-casting as any kind of subclass type. 好，那这边就做到了。But how can we to get major? Originally, that is an object and can call the method directly. But now our method already changed like this. So how can we do that? Here, that's why we need an interface string major to call major. And this string major is actually defined here. String major is a class, right? We create string major, this class, to implement major, that interface. So string major can be assigned to become major. 所以 major 是不是可以转换成 string major？ 因为 string major 有 implement major 嘛，对不对？ So let me write down. So this is our interface, and then we have a major object. Okay. So this is my interface, and this interface with a callback method. And since I want to connect the class to the interface, so I create another class called string major, and string major because I created, so I can define it to increment major, right? I can do that, right? And because I'm implementing major, I have to provide the detail for this. So here is the detail. So here, this object, I can use it. Oh, okay. 但是我可以直接这样啊，我实在是累了。So I can return string length. OK， 应该没有问题。好，就这样。Okay, so here, this data class still want to connect other class through interface. So we still need to define an interface here and string major. This variable will become any class that implement this major. So this is its class string major. And how can I define it? How can I give it the initial value? I can use the constructor. So when I make the constructor data, I can give the input parameter that is string major that can assign to the major. So in this case, my data class is still through the interface to be used by other class. So this way, I will connect string major. And here, I will have that string major object to call major. So that string major object will call this major and return a major, and this major will return the string length, right? So here it will become return string length, and I will sum it up, and here I will compare the current string length and the minimum string length, and then return it. Oh, here should be minimum. Sorry. So, and by the way, here the get minimum, this method, it will return object because we don't know exactly who is going to use this data class. So if today we assign string major here, so actually I should do this. Let me change it to like this. So I can. So this is any kind of major, right? And so this M will become any kind of major, and sorry. Okay. Yeah. This major, so if I connect to string major, then here the interface help me to connect to string object. If I create another rectangle major, that rectangle major can deal with this object with rectangle, and then get the rectangle height and rectangle width as the area. So I can return rectangle area back. So in this case, I am still using this interface here, this M. So M, this variable can become any class data type that implement this interface. So if I assign string major, then M becomes string major. So string major will M. So M, oh no, here. So if it's a string major, sorry, I will upload this new version later. Okay. So M will become string major. If I connect to another class called rectangle major, that obviously deal with rectangle and implement majors. So if this M become rectangle major, then that will return rectangle related value. And so here I will sum up rectangle related value. So this is another way to make my data class more flexible, not only for the class we created, but also for the class in the library. 好，这个方法跟上一个方法唯一不一样 is still this data class still connect to other class through interface. So, but the way here, because the interface defined with callback mechanism, so it allows you your interface to become any kind of data type by this visual class. So you can create, so like here, if I have a rectangle, let me try another one. So if I have another, I can always create another class. So like a rectangle major. Okay, I can always do that this, right? So I can have this class rectangle major to implement major. Then I can implement the detail here I can change it to, since it's rectangle, so I can change it as rectangle. I can always some testing rectangle and adjust rectangle, right? So, for example, if I want to, here I have a bubble area, so I can always use R dot width. Rectangle has this method. Multiply R dot height. So in this case, I can calculate the area. So I can return area. So then in this case, if I want to use this data class, here, this n, when I new data, I can input rectangle measure into here. And so rectangle measure will become the data type here, right? So it definitely will respond to here. So it will call the corresponding measure and do the detail here. So get the area, rectangle area, and then it will sum up rectangle area here, and then it will compare rectangle area. So yeah.
哦，等一下，我一直这应该是 mini 嘛，对。
Okay, sorry. Okay, so do you understand that? So this data class is going to be more flexible for all kinds of data. It's not only for the class that you create by your own. It can be used by other class inside the existing library. Okay, so here. So using this dump test always can help us to transform the object type into the subclass type. So that depends on if you have any other existing library want to use this data class, you can always create a class like a rectangle measure, string measure, or any other and a circle, whatever measure, square measure, whatever, to help you to do this, to connect to the data class. And here, so this is whenever we use it. So here, if I define this measure as a string measure, I can do that, right? Because string measure implement measure, so it can assign to as a string n. So here, when I initiate an object from the data class, I can in the constructor input parameter, I can assign a string n, right? So that way I know my data class is connected to the string measure. And then I can put the string inside. So it can accept the string A, and B, and then get the average length. So this is after I create my data class, I can use this way to define what exactly we want to connect. It's a string measure or a rectangle measure. So if you want to connect to rectangle measure, then here you might change new rectangle measure. And then either in the constructor, you'll assign the rectangle measure here. So here you can new rectangle. So you can give rectangles initial value. So you can new several rectangles. That's the way how we connect to different data type. Okay. So this is the idea. So my data class is still connect to an interface. So no one will influence my data class. I won't need to change my data class of data string or data rectangle or data wallet, always through my interface. And since this interface is a callback interface, so it has to have a modern class that is a middle class to connect the target object string and to implement this measure. Because string cannot directly implement this measure. So I always need to have a middle class for this group. 好，这个是一个 data class。我们第一个讲的是，你如果要用在某一些 class 是你自己 implement 的，你当然就可以直接做。比如说某一些 class 你自己做的，就可以直接 access 这个 interface。但是第二个 data class 要改的是，它还允许这种不能直接 access 你 interface 的情况。所以这个是比较 flexible 的，比较有弹性的，好，有任何一种 class 都可以这样用，好，那这个。Okay, so this way is also called decouple. When we create an application in Java, we want our objects are decoupling. They are separate. They are dependent. Okay, independent. Okay, another thing, as I mentioned earlier, there are several classes in the library. There are also several interfaces in the library. This is the most used interface comparable. 这个 comparable 的 interface 在 library 里面的 define 是这样。So public interface comparable, and here it's a generic class. Like, do you still remember array list? So when we define array list can be defined with different class data types. So array list can be string array list, rectangle array list, wallet array list. So here, here T means generic class, any kind of data type. So it can be bank account, can be wallet, can be whatever. And here, inside this interface, there is a method. This method will compare to the same data type class, another same data type. So if your T is a student, here it will be another student. And here is a bank account and another bank account. So it always compares two same data type object. And it will return you an integer. So it might be negative integer or positive integer. So that means it's like a dictionary. So smaller or larger or equal, like that. So you will easily to know what these two objects, their relationship. So like this, S1 and S2. So if S1 is less than S2, it will be negative. So if the result is 0, that means they are the same. And if it's positive, so then it's greater than S2. Okay, this is how it compares. So we can always use create our class to implement those interfaces. And so you can implement comparable and define the generic data class type. Since I'm a student class, so here I definitely use this to compare with student. And then here, inside this compare to, you can define what exactly you are going to compare. Are you going to compare to student's ID or student's score or student's height or student whatever? So what exactly you are going to compare? Since student will have a lot of attributes you can compare to. But what's the main function, main focus you want to compare to? You can put the detail here. Okay. And so like here, you student, inside student, you have the student ID, you have name, you have age. So you can do this compare to. If we are using age to compare, so here will be the detail how we compare it. So if the age is equal to another's age, then return 0. If it's larger than that, return 1. Otherwise, return -1. So in this case, we always can compare two students' age and know the sequence. So whenever we do this compare to, it's easier for us to do sort. You can directly call arrays this class to do the sort, or you can do collections to call the sort. But no matter which one you are going to implement, before that you have to implement comparable interface. Otherwise, they cannot be sorted. So, like this, here, I have a student, I can make a student array list. I can new student into this array list. Then, I can directly use collections that sort to sort this student. Since in the student class, I implement compare to based on the age. So result, you can see the result. Here, after sort, it will sort by age. So sort will depend on how you implement your compare to in your original class type. So in the student, this class, I implement compare to by age. So when I sort it, it will depend on the age. 22, 23, 24, 25，对吧？ If I want to sort by ID, then inside the student, the compare to method, I have to implement that with student ID. Then it will sort by student ID. OK？ 好，这里就是跟大家介绍一下，就是我们有一些 interface 是 library 里面就有的，像这个 comparable 就是一个 interface 已经开发好的在那儿了。那它里面有一个 method 叫 compare to， 任何一个 class 都可以去 implement 这个 comparable interface， 但是 implement 这 comparable interface 就必须提供完整的细节去 implement compare to 这个 method。那像我刚刚 student 有 implement comparable 这个 interface， 而我在我的 compare to method 里面，我的细节是什么？我的细节是 age， 有吗？我这边的细节是用 age 在做 compare 的。好，如果我是用 age 在做 compare 的话，到时候我用 sort 这个 student 这个地方，我用 collections sort 或者 arrays sort， 它就会根据我 compare to 里面的这个 criteria 去做排序。好， so 这个 OK。 Common errors like an integer string, they can directly involve arrays that sort and the collection that sort. They don't need to implement comparability. Okay, those are the libraries already implement those things. And so why you use a custom class or object if you want to use the two sort method like array sort and collection sort, you have to implement comparable interface first and override this compare to method. Because like what I said, inside the student class, you can always compare student ID or student name, or student age, student score, student height, whatever. So that depends on what exactly you want to compare to. Then that can help you to sort. So this is the all what we have today. 好，有没有什么问题？目前这里有没有什么问题呢？Okay, so let me remind you again. Interface is not a class. Interface is whenever we use interface to declare a variable, that variable will be the class type that implements this interface. So the second data class, we use this callback mechanism to implement our interface method. And this way can allow the data class to be connected to string or wallet, no matter it's created by ourselves or Java experts. 所以第二个就是我们今天介绍的这个 data class 这个还是透过 interface 来做连接，但是它的设定方法就是一个 callback 的技术，所以它不再是直接让设定成 major 的形态，就是让 major 转换成任何目标形态，因为它像 string 它就不能 implement major。所以我们就必须要做一个中介的 class， 像 string major 或 rectangle major 这种我们自己 create 才可以去 implement major。那因为这样子我们自己 create 的这个 class 里面呢，也才可以定义它这个 major 里面详细的内容。那这里可以是 rectangle 的 area， 也可以是 rectangle 的 height。或 rectangle 的 width， 就是看你的目标是什么，所以你就可以用 rectangle 的任何东西去做，这样。所以我们的第二个 data class 还是用 this callback mechanism allow us to have more flexible data class to connect to all kind of class data type. So here. The target object. The target will be, we won't know exactly who is going to use our data class. So this minimal target type, we define it as object because it can be done testing as any kind of subclass type. And here we have interface and because we still want to connect to other class by using this interface. So whenever we use this interface, that is whenever people initiate this data object, they will assign us their target interface object. That is like this, rectangle major or string major, right? So they can give us the initial connection here. So major will become rectangle major or string major. And so this object will look at the corresponding major that method and return us the right value. So we can do the rest of the calculation. 好，我快断气了。好，有没有懂？所以 OK, so next class I will go back to the video tab. I will record it earlier, so before the weekend. I hope you can listen to the tab, and then when you come to the class, we will have lab practice. 所以下一堂课我们就会翻转一下，这2堂是因为我觉得大家对 interface 会非常的不熟悉，所以我必须要看着你学习，然后知道你到底有没有在听make sure 大家有懂。那下一堂课我们会再做一些整理， 然后再把这个 interface 再除了整理 review， 然后还有就是会介绍一些小细节。那就是下一堂课我会用录音的方法，所以你们会 we will upload the video in Moodle by Friday. Or no, I don't think that you will listen to that before Friday. So 对，大概就是 Friday. So please try to listen to the video during the weekend before the next class, and then we will have in-class practice next week. And after that, next week, we will have the first exam. So time passed so fast. You have to learn quickly, okay? And by the way, how about your project? Do you find your project members already? Someone just noticed that they didn't have a group member yet, and we already grouped you. So if you just didn't report as your group members, please come to us. I will update the group's information for you. 还没有分组的同学，昨天才有同学发现，他只是忘记告诉我他要跟谁一组，所以我就自动帮他分了组，那他就被分到跟别人在一起了。那你要记得赶快来找我们的 TA， 他就会帮你把你跟你喜欢的人在一起。And let me remind you, you should start thinking about your project idea and start making all kind of tasks and all kind of schedule. I will check on you next week. OK， 下个礼拜我就会请你们来告诉我一些基本的想法。I will check on your project idea. You need to have a focus by this time. So next week I will call your team and you have someone need to tell me what exactly you want to do. And OK， 好，下周我就会跟你们 check 一下你们啊，反正你们在练习的时候时间多得很，我可以一组一组的要你们起来跟我讨论一下你们要做什么。好，所以下周的话最好就是 next week please try to sit with your group members, and so it's easily to discuss. OK， 好，所以下周请你跟你自己的朋友们坐在一起哈。真的，那个男女朋友不要同组，真的会分手。好 ，OK， 不然就是越来越甜蜜哦。我们来看看了，好，危险，真的都不听老师的话，你们真的是。好了 ，OK， 那我们 let's have a 5 minutes break and we come back to today's lab。
主要请你们写 Lab 12。那 Lab 12主要的概念就是刚刚上课老师教的那个 interface 里面 callback 的概念。那 callback 的概念就是今天假如你的那个软体你会用到已经写好的那一些 class， 但是已经写好那一些 class 呢，并不能去做更动的动作，所以你这时候就必须要去写中间的一个 class 来作为你的 interface 跟已经写好的那个 class 之间的沟通桥梁。那以这个 Lab 12来讲好了，今天会请你们先定义好2个已经写好的一个那个 class， 那分别就叫做 Stock 跟 Fruit。那记得这2个都是不能去做更动的，所以呢，你们在建Eclipse 的时候，记得就是创2个那个 package。那第一个就是创那个 lab.practice， 那我在讲义这边也有写说，好，你们就先创一个package， 然后叫做这个名字，然后把这2个假装已经建立好的不能更动的 class 写在里面，那剩下的这一些 class 或是 interface 就是写在额外的 package 当中。 那这边你们就叫做 main， 然后把其他的 class 都放在里面就可以了。那这个概念主要的意思就是说，好，今天已经创好 Stack 跟 Fruit 可以使用，这个是签一个工程师他已经写好的程式码，但是你不能更动。可是呢，你会想要用到的方法不只有 Name、Price 跟 Sales， 因为我们今天要帮公司产生的报表是说，好，我要去看说，我今天假如是一个水果店，那我要去看每一个水果它所带来的给我的价值是什么。所以你在这3个方法里面，并没有找到可以什么 get total value 的这个方法嘛，反而是说你要把所有的这个 array list 当中所有的 sales 全部加总起来，再去乘以它的价值，才会是你最终的那个价值存在嘛。所以这时候你就必须要利用这个 fruit analyzer 来扩充这个 fruit 的方法。就像是 fruit 里面这个 measure 嘛，你里面写的方法就是先用 for 回圈，把 sales 这个 array list 里面的 sales 全部做一个加总，然后再利用点 get price 把它相乘起来，之后回传那2个相乘后的值就可以了。那这时候呢，你 company 一开始会请你们就是有一个 constructor 会请那个使用者，你在创建一个 company 的时候，就必须给定 analyzer。这个意思就是说，好，你今天这家公司你是以贩售什么为主？会已经先确定的。假如你是水果店，你传进去的 analyzer 就是 for 水果店的 analyzer。那假如你今天是一家投资公司，专门投资股票的公司好了，那你传进去的那个 analyzer 就一定是 stock analyzer 这样子。所以它里面写的这个 measure 就是我要去取得那个总价值，不管是我股票的总价值还是水果的总价值。然后另外一个就是 gain name， 那 gain name 的意思就是说，我们之后叫你们印出来会是长这个样子。一开始假如我这家公司是一个水果店，那我用刚刚的这个 analyzer 的软体的话，你就会帮我产出我净价值是多少，然后每一个水果它所产生的价值分别是多少，然后这个排序呢会由大到小往下排序哦，并不是说我一开始就先输入 strawberry， 后面就输入 apple 或 banana， 我反而是随便输入 apple 啊 banana 或 strawberry， 它的排序就会由大到小去做排列。那今天如果换作是那个投资公司的话，它一样会帮我印出总价值跟这个每一个股票它所带来的价值是多少这样子。那记得我刚刚有讲到那个我们中间去做一个扩充的动作，就是 fruit analyzer， 它主要就是扩充 fruit 的这个方法。那所以它里面的这个方法是measure。那记得它使用的时机，像我们平常在使用 class 的 function 的时候，都是写这个 instance， 然后去点那个方法嘛，点 name 好了。那今天你扩充的话，你就是拿扩充的这个 class 的 object， 然后举例来说，它的 object 叫 fruit analyzer。那你去点这个方选的时候，记得你后面放的这个 argument， 记得是真正要扩充的这个 object， 但是它是为谁去创造的？它是为 fruit 去创造的嘛？那记得这里就是写 fruit， 就是 fruit 的资料形态会传进来。那这个主要就是这礼拜的那个 lab 作业，然后如果你们等一下有问题的话，一样举手。